Welcome to Tatum Talks with myself, Ian Brannan, and Kelvin Tatum to look back at the end of the 2024 Speedway season. We're pretty much there across all of the leagues now. At the time of recording this, there's just one fixture left in the championship. It's the Knockout Cup. But in that one, Pool Pirates have already won 2 trophies. They're going for a treble. So we'll wait and see what the result is with that. But our focus to begin with is going to be on the Speedway Grand Prix series. And it seems a little bit of a distant memory now, actually, since that final meeting in Torun. But inevitably, it was, of course, Bartosz Zmarzlik who once again lifts the world crown. A 5th world title for Zmarzlik is closing in on being the greatest of all time, you could argue, in that metric. And maybe it got a little bit closer between the pack sort of chasing him with Robert Lambert and Freddie Lindgren in there. But Robert Lambert getting that 2nd place, Freddie Lindgren 3rd, the top 3 riders in the world. So just a reflection on that final night in Torun.
Yeah, it was, a bit of a celebration, really. And obviously, after the result in Voyens with Lambert winning his first Grand Prix, it looked like it was going to be fairly straightforward for him to just, at home, at his home track in Poland, you sort of fancied that he would make the latter stages and he would go through to the final. But, and Zmarzlik started poorly. So this sort of, I think a lot of people's ideas, it was going to be quite a straightforward night in that regard. It was far from it. It was typical Torun in lots of ways, terrific crowd, great atmosphere. The racing, funnily enough, on the Friday night had been pretty good as well with the under-21s, with that Victor Przemski coming through. He was the best rider, so he was deserved SGP2 world champion. But the Saturday night, it was wild. I mean, some of the racing was just incredible. The way the track was set up, it was a bit greasy on the inside, lots of grip around the outside, riders having to take some big risks, actually, to overtake and try and push forward. But, as it transpired, Ian, as you're aware, obviously Zmarzlik really had no right to win the meeting. He really didn't. He was 3 points from 3 rides. He finally then won a race in his 4th outing where he had a restart when Lambert was away, and then he managed to actually in the restart get the better of Robert, but he had to ride defensively for 4 laps. It didn't look that convincing, and he just crept into the semi-finals. And then, when he was in the final, he got that gate 3 and just decided that I'm going to block Freddie, going to break his heart, and he somehow managed to find a way to win. And I think when you look back on that, just from his personal, he wanted to finish on a high, but he did what Robert Lambert didn't. He got himself in and then managed to win, whereas Robert unfortunately slipped up and sort of drifted out of the meeting, and that opened up this drama that unfolded with Freddie Lindgren, responding after a desperate night 2 weeks previously in Voyens, where he inexplicably just didn't perform, and it looked like he was going to snatch silver off of him. So that bit of drama, in the end, it was a reprieve for Robert, who, when you reflect on the season, 2nd place is decent. But I think all in all, a good conclusion to the season.
We'll talk about the plan for 2025 shortly. Looking at the rounds, the wildcards and all that. So that's to come. Let's just focus on Bartosz Zmarzlik for now. 5th world title. Here's a discussion I've seen online, an interesting one, and get your thoughts on it. Would Bartosz Zmarzlik be a 5-time world champion if it wasn't the Grand Prix and it was the old World Championship format of the one-off meeting? Because he has started slowly, hasn't he, in many of the Grand Prix, and he's come to the party at the right time, which is something you can't do on the one-off nights. But do you think that he would have done it in the old format as well as the new?
Well, when you look at it like that, you would suggest that no, he wouldn't, because this season particularly, he's had meetings where he hasn't performed as he would have liked, and there's no question that they started playing around with bikes during the summertime. He missed the semi-finals in Cardiff where he did experiment with a different engine that night, and for whatever reason, I don't think we'll ever be told exactly why, there have been several GPs this season where he just hasn't got going. as well as he would have liked. He's been tipped upside down a few times. He's had a couple of nasty crashes. Obviously, Riga, the one with Mikkelsen, he got hit in the Speedway of Nations in the first corner. So he's been knocked about a bit. It hasn't been plain sailing. But I also fancy that if it had been the old format, I think he probably would have found a way to continually to do it. It's hypothetical, of course, but I think the more important question for me, Ian, if you're going to suggest would he have won as many World Championships if Artem Laguta had been in the World Championship in the last 3 seasons? I think that's the big question, because the last time that Laguta and Zmarzlik went head to head, they both got off to big starts in all the meetings. They won 5 Grand Prix each, and Artem Laguta in the end came out on top. And I think I think is something that potentially a lot of people will reflect on. Yes, he's 5-time world champion. He is a great advert, and he is, for Poland, he's a fantastic ambassador for the sport for Poland. I'm not sure worldwide, but the fact is Laguta has been a rider that has proven that he can beat him. And nobody's done it since.
Well, that brings us seamlessly and very smoothly around to the obvious elephant in the room. Artem Laguta and Emil Sayfutdinov, should they be in the Grand Prix?
Sure.
And a lot of people think clearly they should be, based on the performances in Poland. They're 2 of the top riders. They are giving the rest of the Grand Prix lineup a run for their money over in Poland, but they're not allowed to race in the Grand Prix. Now they're racing on Polish licenses. They're Polish citizens. But the Polish authorities, it seems, are less than keen for them to be part of the Grand Prix series. From what I heard, it may or may not be true, but it came with a fair amount of I don't know. You could vouch for the story that some of the riders were told that they were in, that they were going to be named as wildcards, and there was news stories going around from what I would class as reasonably reputable sources, where some stories you tend to get a bit of a word from these people, and they turn out to be usually not far off the mark. So that is the rumour, at least the word, that they were desperately trying to get them in. But I think it seems to me not the Grand Prix as such, but the Polish authorities that have got involved. And over to you, Kelv. What do you reckon?
No, it's very political. Clearly, there's a massive argument for Laguta and Emil Sayfutdinov, 2 of the best riders in the world, to be back in the series. And I think there's growing feeling, and there's clearly at the back end of this season with petitions being formed, and I think it was public knowledge that the FIM were going to sit down and speak to both Laguta and Emil Sayfutdinov at the back end of this last season. And it did look reasonably positive that maybe, if not both of them, then you would suggest that at least one of them would have got back in. And that, if it was going to be one, then it would have to have been Laguta, because he was the one that was world champion. Yes, Laguta has been riding remarkably well for Wrocław, and actually has beaten Bartosz Zmarzlik regularly throughout the season. And I don't think that would have gone unnoticed. Clearly it hasn't. But the political situation in Poland is a complex one, and I think it's one that clearly, although Discovery have come round to the thinking of having the 2 Russians back in, I don't think they thought that initially. I think in actual fact, initially, they were quite happy to actually leave them to one side. But I think now, having been the rights holder for 3 years and had the same rider win the World Championship 3 years consecutively, and they've got to understand the sport a bit more, they, I think, would be more than happy. And I think everybody would be happy, because it would make the lineup that bit more competitive. But the PZM, they are very powerful. And Polish Speedway is very powerful. And I suggest, I'm not privy to this, I don't know this verbatim, but I would suggest that the PZM probably don't want them in, because they would suggest it denies Polish riders the opportunity to be qualifying or in the Grand Prix. I would suggest that might well be the case. So it's a shame, Ian, isn't it? It's a shame, because they are still... they're mid-30s now, both of them, I think. So they're still more than capable. They're still hungry. They're riding very well for the league clubs they ride for. So we are being denied seeing two of the world's best.
So the argument from the Polish authorities is that putting Emil and Artem in as Polish riders denies other Polish riders a chance of getting in the Grand Prix. So the response there has been that there's been no other Polish riders named as wildcards. So just two Polish riders in the Grand Prix series of 2025. Obviously, Bartosz Zmarzlik and Dominik Kubera, who qualified from the Grand Prix Challenge, are the only two Polish representatives in the Speedway Grand Prix Series for 2025. We'll come to the full wildcards and the full lineup in a moment, but it certainly does make it interesting, doesn't it there, Kelvin? From a Polish point of view, they invest a lot of money into Speedway, they will say, even into the Grand Prix Series by putting multiple events on. They're hosting the Speedway of Nations, of course, at Torun as well. And with two Polish riders in there, that they're probably going to feel a little hard done by, but I guess the response is if you want more Polish riders in the Grand Prix Series, they're going to have to qualify.
I'll be interesting to see exactly where the series goes. I think just to sort of wrap up on the wildcard situation and the PZM, it is a complex situation. Obviously, both those two lads are Polish citizens. They actually ride with Polish licenses. They didn't take out citizenship because of the conflict. They were actually citizens of Poland long before that. So, that can't be levelled at those two individuals. I think it's just the fact that whether they are in the qualifying system or whether they were put in the Grand Prix, I suspect that the Polish authorities will look at that either way, they would potentially deny opportunities for homegrown riders to be actually qualifying in the top six or getting through the qualifying system. And clearly that's a hurdle that the Discovery and FIM haven't been able to overcome, because the wildcards don't include Emil Sayfutdinov or Artem Laguta. Regarding the lineup and the wildcards themselves, and the fact that there isn't a third Polish rider when there are 3 Grand Prix in Poland, staggers me. I think that would suggest that there are, I would say, probably not on each other's Christmas card lists right now. The PZM,
yes,
Discovery and
I think
the
that's fair to
FIM,
say.
because there's no doubt, Ian, if you were a country, I know that Poland is very, very powerful. We all know that. They clean up regularly now. It's where all the money's paid. It's the highest profile league. But I am still staggered that somebody like Dudek or Maciej Janowski didn't get a wild card, and they haven't got 3. When you consider now there are 4 Australian riders, and there is not an Australian Grand Prix. Now, there isn't one. There's been lots of talk right from when Discovery took over, right from the first season. We are yet to go to Australia. So I am slightly staggered that Kvek, who finished 15th, Hülkenberg, who finished 12th, were put back in.
Yes, well, let's have a look at the full lineup. Of course, we've got the top 6 from the Grand Prix last year. Bartosz Zmarzlik, of course, world champion. Robert Lambert, Freddie Lindgren, Dan Bewley, Martin Vasilik and Jack Holder were the 6 automatic qualifiers from this year's series. And then we've got the winners of the challenge, which is Brady Kurtz, Dominik Kubera got in through the challenge, Max Frick back in through the challenge as well, as is Anders Thomsen. And then the wildcard selections of Kai Hülkenberg, Jan Kvek, Jason Doyle and Mikkel Mikkelsen, and the SEC champion, who's Andrei Lebedevs. So that's the full lineup. I think fantastic from a British point of view that we've got, first of all, obviously Robert Lambert and Dan Bewley in there, but also riders that British fans can latch onto, such as Jason Doyle, Brady Kurtz, Max Frick. That's got to be good for Speedway in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Brady Kurtz, I think, is somebody that warrants some time spent on him, because Brady Kurtz has had a fabulous season. He really has had a breakout season. I think he's been sort of knocking on the door for a little while, but it really has come together for him in 2024. I would suggest that it's going to be a season that's going to be tough to replicate. But, he rode terrific for Bellevue, flew, in that second leg of the grand final, flew out to Pardubice, difficult conditions, and came through in flying colours. So credit to him. He's done it the hard way. He hasn't been given a wild card. He's had to get, obviously there's been Jason Doyle and Jack Holder and Max Frick in front of him for some time. He's been the one that's been on the outside looking in, but now he's made his way right in there. So fair play. That's a good effort from him. Max Frick back in. 4 Australians in the Grand Prix. Interesting. Lebedev's, I think, is a rider that did get better in the second half of the season. I think he's a decent rider. I don't think he's a winner at the highest level, but I think he's a decent rider and he improved. Mikkelsen was having the season of his life after 2 awful seasons in the Grand Prix, and he was unfortunate. And for Jason Doyle, I think a lot of people in Britain will be chuffed to bits that Jason's back, and I'm pleased for him because he's been a loyal supporter of British Speedway. He lives here, he likes riding here, and he started the season off in great fashion. So I can't think that he will be anything different next year. I know he's raring to go. But the other 2 wild cards I do have issues with. I know why they're in. But Kai Hülkenberg, lovely bloke, rides quite nicely. He's back in. It's because there's a German Grand Prix and they want a presence and they want that slight variation in nationality. Jan Kvek, smashing lad, very young, a lot of time ahead. Didn't do it in the at home in the challenge. He made 1 semi-final in the last Grand Prix. I think he's very fortunate to be back in the Grand Prix. Very fortunate.
Do you feel hard done by if you're any of the other riders that obviously finished above him in the Grand Prix series or in the challenge,
I would say all of them will feel very hard done by when they look at that. Even I know Ty Wolfenden had a lot of wild cards and he hasn't had a great time, but he's a 3-time world champion and he hasn't got a wild card. And then you look at somebody like Dudek and Maciej Janowski and Leon Madsen, they'll all be going, really? Really? All of those guys I've just mentioned, with respect to the 2 lads I've just, Hülkenberg and Kvek, they're better than them. They're better. And it's slightly surprising. So, you go from the potential of having Saifutinov and Laguta back in, and then it's announced that Kai Hülkenberg and Jan Kvek will come in. So there's a deal being done. There's been compromises left, right and centre, and it leaves lots of question marks over this lineup. And in lots of ways, it's slightly unsatisfactory, really. I understand that Janowski and Dudek have had their chances. They have. But if you ask me, and if you think about it, Ian, if you wrote them down, who are the better riders, I think a lot of people would agree that Dudek, Maciej Janowski, Leon Madsen and Ty Wolfenden are better than Hülkenberg and Kvek right now. I think so. I think majority of people would go along with that.
There's certainly bigger names, aren't they, that would, put bums on seats, I suppose. I know that Hülkenberg and Kvek might well do that in their respective nations, but also these stadiums are not exactly cavernous principality stadiums to fill either, are they? They're much smaller venues. Let's move on to the calendar, though, while we're on that, because we have got another stadium to fill in Great Britain in 2025. With a big addition to the calendar, Manchester gets a Grand Prix at the Bellevue National Speedway Stadium in Manchester, 14th of June, and it's happening. Grand Prix at Bellevue.
Yeah, absolutely, and potentially could be the best Grand Prix of the year. The track has a fabulous reputation. There's no doubt that it's arguably the best track in Europe. It has staged some World Championship events since its inauguration in 2016. So it's no problem with that. That side of it, I've got absolutely no qualms with, and I'm really excited about the fact that it's going to Manchester. Obviously, the attendance and the capacity is a challenge for Manchester. It isn't a particularly big stadium in that regard. I'm sure that they'll have the temporary stand down in turns 3 and 4. But even then, the capacity is not that much. It's not that big. So I would like to think, Ian, that it will be absolutely heaving. I think there'll be people on the roofs, hopefully, to mean. I sincerely
Cherry
hope so.
pickers.
Yeah, exactly. I think they could be popping up everywhere in Norton, I think. I think you'll find. But I wouldn't put it past the Mancunians to get up to it. But like, I'm delighted for them, and I think it could be a real highlight of the season. Will it impact on Cardiff? Only time will tell. Whether there'll be a lesser turnout for Cardiff in August, later next year, we'll have to wait and see. But 2 Grand Prix at home, first time it's ever happened, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they're both very different speedway trips. I've seen some polls online, people putting a question on there, which Grand Prix are you going to? Are you going to Manchester, Cardiff or both? And for the most part, Cardiff has been the winner. Obviously, a lot of people are going to do both. Listen, there'll be a fair split, I imagine, but I guess Manchester and Cardiff offer completely different things in terms of the whole experience. I think obviously you've got the racing, you've got the track, it's a smaller venue, but it is out of town. You've got people who make a regular thing of going to Cardiff and have the full weekend there. It is in the centre of the city. You can get there by train or bus or car or plane. And once you're in there, you've got the bars, restaurants, you've got the stadium just next door, and there's all that side of it. And a lot of people have, it's been a fixture for over 20 years for a lot of people's annual speedway calendars, and they're not looking to give that up anytime soon. So, at the same time, Bellevue is not as big a stadium to fill as well. So hopefully the two can coexist side by side, because I think we need Cardiff on the calendar. It is still the second most attended Grand Prix on the series, and it offers something different, I think.
Yeah, look, I hear what you say, and what you've just said is very valid about the fact that you're going to a major city. It offers a stadium that has a roof. It has more facilities, better facilities than going to a permanent track like Bellevue. I get all that. I understand that. I think to counter it a little bit, just playing devil's advocate, the attendance at Cardiff has been down since COVID. We haven't had quite as many people going. It was more this year, and I've got to believe that after the Brit 1-2 this year, that you'd like to think there was a real good feel factor about it. And the racing was decent. I think as much as people like going to Cardiff, and there may well be a reaction online to suggest that that's the one they would prefer, there's been lots of criticism of the racing at Cardiff as well. Difficult to overtake, not of the same quality as certainly at Manchester. So there were pros and cons for both. I think as a venue for a World Championship, a special weekend, Cardiff obviously offers far more. But I do think that the reputation of the racing that comes from like the hardcore speedway fan, I think will go to Bellevue, definitely. I think you've got people that will go to Cardiff that maybe don't go regularly all the time, but they are maybe slightly, I don't know if they're more affluent or they're prepared to spend the money to have a hotel to spend the weekend there. We had the sprint race this year, of course, so you could go in and see a bit of action on Friday as well as Saturday. But they're very different, aren't they? They're very different. In some ways, we're ticking 2 boxes, aren't we? We've potentially got the best permanent track in Europe, and we've got one of the best temporary tracks in the world to go to in our own country. So I don't see it as a negative. I just think it will be interesting to see if Bellevue detracts from Cardiff, or there's great enthusiasm because the fact that we've got 2 Grand Prix and 2 opportunities to see the best, supposedly the best riders in the world.
Yeah, a lot of work has gone into bringing the Grand Prix to the National Speedway Stadium. I just hope that people do back it, and I know that a lot of people are saying that they're going to go and looking forward to it, but obviously they had the situation which I did the interview with Robin Southwell on the British Speedway podcast, and they had the big temporary stand that was up. It cost them an absolute fortune, and it was barely used. And obviously the Speedway of Nations, a different situation, a bigger commitment. Of course, it's over the many days. Historically, it's not been the best. I'm sure you'll know, but the Grand Prix, hopefully a different proposition and a packed house and hopefully a fantastic afternoon of Speedway.
Yeah, like that Speedway of Nations format is difficult, Ian, and to be honest, right, even with the World Cup, this is not just a Speedway of Nations problem, but even the World Cup, the qualifiers have never been well attended. Never. And I remember back in the day when we had the race off on the Friday or the Thursday for the World Cup. Often that was the best meeting of the week and there's nobody there. So that's not unusual. That week is difficult to sell. And in lots of respects, if they want people in there, that was a ticketing pricing problem. That was clearly overpriced for the Speedway of Nations for that week. You're right. They need to get it right. They need to pitch it right. It isn't cheap to stage Grand Prix, so they're going to want to get that about right. But there's nothing worse than looking at a temporary stand that's empty. So you can't have that. You just can't have that. So they need to make it sensibly priced if they can.
So the full programme is this. Landshut first up in May, at the start of May, 3rd of May, the first Grand Prix, and then Warsaw, 17th of May. Prague, we've got SGP3 there, 30th of May, and then the full Grand Prix on the 31st. June is Manchester, 14th of June. And then the week after, heading to Gorzów in Poland. July, big weekend in Melilla in Sweden is the only one, actually. It's 4th and 5th of July, SGP2, and then the Saturday night GP, 5th of July. August is a fairly busy programme. Riga at the start, 1st of August for SGP2 and the main Grand Prix on the Saturday night. And then Cardiff on the 16th. And Wrocław on the 30th into the bank holiday weekend. And then in September, big one in Wojens. It's all happening there with SGP2, the climax, final round of that. We've got SGP4, which is taking place as well, which for the younger kids, and then the Wojens Grand Prix on the 13th. So the 12th and 13th in Wojens. 3 world champions lifting a trophy there. And that's the end of the Grand Prix series. And then it's Speedway of Nations, final weekend of September, first weekend of October, 30th and 1st, 3rd and 4th of October in Torun in Poland for the Speedway of Nations. So that's your schedule for 2025.
Indeed it is. Obviously a slightly shorter season with the Grand Prix. It's just over 4 and a bit months, starting slightly later and finishing earlier. I think people will make comment on that. I think slightly disappointing that we've only got 10 Grand Prix, but I suspect that FIM are not too keen on continually having 4 Grand Prix in one country when you've got a shorter series. So I think I think they had dispensation for 2024 with 4 Speedway Grand Prix in Poland. I think we're still waiting. It's something that's lurking in the background all the time now. When are we going down under? When are we going? And I think, obviously, that's something that Discovery have got to try and rectify, because there's no doubt that that was part of their remit, is to take it into another continent. Because effectively, at the moment, we have a European Championship because it's only raced in Europe. But the fact, those venues, we all are aware of them, we know them. Wojens to finish the Grand Prix, that will take a little bit of getting used to, but Jakob Olsen and his team they work awfully hard. And the Speedway of Nations, actually, in Torun, is a pretty cool place to have it. It's a great town, super track. If the weather behaves, that'll be a pretty spectacular event. I'd like to think so. Maybe Poland will actually the one thing they've never won. Maybe they'll finally get themselves together and win it, because they're quite accustomed to winning everything else. But the Speedway of Nations has been a bit of a thorn in their side. So,
Yeah, so that's going to be the way things look. What do you think of the prospect of more than one Grand Prix down under? Throw out that idea.
Well, ideally, you need to go to New Zealand if you can as well. That would make sense, wouldn't it? If you're going to the expense of shipping everything there, it isn't. If you were doing a Grand Prix in Sydney and then you did one in Auckland, then that would be fabulous. And I think that would make it, to go just for one meeting, Ian, it's a long, long way to go for one meeting. And I did it in 2017 when Jason won the World Championship. It was a It's a big trip to go, and particularly at the end of the season. But if you're going there for 2 meetings, I think it would make sense. Whether it's practical and whether it's financially achievable, I'm not sure. But it would be fantastic if they could do that.
So Australia then, you wouldn't be surprised to see the Grand Prix head there within the next few years. And of course the United States, you'd think that would be on the agenda as well, given the connections with Greg Hancock and what have you. But is there an opportunity for Warner Brothers Discovery through the Grand Prix to grow Speedway in so far untapped into countries and sort of bring Speedway to some places that haven't really experienced it, where there are countries with a big passion for motorsport, particularly motorcycling, that haven't been accessed so far. So do you think there is that opportunity? And where, given the dream, thinking big, where would we take Speedway?
I think if you're looking at new territories, Ian, I think obviously Europe, for me, the obvious one that they're motorcycle crazy is Spain. I think if you could get a temporary track in Spain, I think you'd fill the stadium. There's no doubt that the enthusiasm for motorcycling in that part of the world is huge. France, you mentioned France. Yes, they have a few tracks, and they have a following, but it's fairly low key. But for me, Spain would be the one that I would target if I was looking to expand into Europe. They love their motocross. They're road racing. They have huge stars, and they're not just stars within the motorcycling world. They transcend it. They're everywhere. People like Marc Marquez. I mean, crikey, he literally is everywhere there. But I think you'd look at places like Abu Dhabi, Dubai, maybe somewhere there potentially to move into the Speedway world, to go into a part of the world like that. But hey, like, these things are easily spoken about, and obviously logistically and financially are obviously quite challenging. But I think one step at a time. I'd like to see the series go back to 12 rounds, and if we could get one in Australia, one in New Zealand, I think that would really make it a genuine world championship, and one that I think that would satisfy a lot of critics. That we're still, this will be the 4th season for Discovery next year, and we're still not outside Europe.
It will be interesting to see how things pan out, but that's the plan for the 2025 Speedway Grand Prix Series, and it gets underway in May. Right now, let's turn our attention to British Speedway. Well, the weather played its part, but finally we have the 2024 Rowe Motor Oil Premiership champions in British Speedway. And it was a clash between the Bellevue Aces and the Leicester Lions, but the Bellevue Aces were the ones raising the trophy after the second leg. But the damage really done in that first leg at the National Speedway Stadium.
Yeah, Leicester were hanging on in that first meeting. I think they had 7 consecutive 3-alls, and they were just 8 points back. And in truth, if they could have stayed there and they could have held it to 8-10, I think Stuart Dixon would have been relatively happy with that. In the end, the class of Kurtz and Bewley shone through, and they really turned on some incredible racing at the back end of the first leg, and they stretched it out to 18 points, which was a mountain to climb. But saying that, when you looked at the league results, Leicester Lions had actually beaten Bellevue by 16 and 20 points, respectively, in the 2 league encounters. Admittedly, I think Bellevue weren't at full strength always, but nonetheless, that they had beaten Bellevue by a significant margin on both turns. So I had a feeling if they could have started relatively well, then maybe they would have been able to put a bit of pressure on them. But in truth, Ian, I believe when I look back at it now, hindsight being a fabulous thing, Leicester had that fabulous run up to the conclusion of the regular season. They really were hitting the heights. But when the playoffs came, it was almost like they'd run out of steam. They struggled against Ipswich, didn't they? They struggled against Ipswich and patched up. They only actually got through in the last race, in the second leg. It was only heat 15 that they actually won it. And then, really and truthfully, they were no match for the Aces in the final, and they lost both meetings. They lost at home as well. And for the Bellevue Aces, they came through in flying colours. I mean, brilliant performances. I mean, like Bewley was just outstanding. 10 rights, 10 wins, and was absolutely extraordinary. And it was their year again, and 2 championships in 3 years is impressive.
Yeah, it's going well for the Bellevue Aces, and I know I spoke to Robin Southwells, one of the owners, last week on the British Speedway podcast, and they took over in 2017 when they took the reins, and of course COVID got in the way and the break there. But it was always their mission to bring silverware back to the National Speedway Stadium, and of course get the Grand Prix or bigger events into there as well. And they've achieved that from that point of view, and be interesting to see what happens next year. Of course, as always, there's always going to be some, you have great success, you end up having to make changes. It's a bit of a frustration with Speedway, but I think Mark Lemon, obviously, there's a good Australian nucleus to that team, but he'll be looking to keep as many of those boys together as he can and continue on from where they left off.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's nothing worse, and I've experienced it myself as a racer, as a rider, where you win the league one season with a team, and then it's literally ripped apart because of averages and so forth, and then you underperform the next season, and that is awful because fans literally have become accustomed to success. They're expecting the team to really push on and be challenging for silverware, and if you're not, it can get very toxic very quickly around the stadium, and that good feel factor can be lost very quickly. So it is important that Bellevue, and I'm sure that the powers that be there will do their very best to enable them to track a competitive team. They have done for the last 3 years, so I don't see any reason why 2025 won't be any different. Obviously they'd love to keep Kurtz and Bewley, of course they would, and build their team around those two riders. And I'm sure that Mark Lemon will be doing everything he can. You get the feeling that there could be some changes in the middle order. They may have to, but at the moment, Ian, it's all speculation. It's nothing firm, but it wouldn't surprise you, would it, that there'll be some changes in the team at some point. But, as I say, they have been remarkably good at rebuilding and keeping a really exciting team together. So as champions, Sheffield did it last year. I'm sure they've managed to put a good team together. But congratulations to them. I think, Leicester Lions, quickly, I'd like to say, huge improvement, heartbreak in 2023. Getting to the final in 2024 is huge progress for them. Paul Cairns, Stuart Dixon, all concerned, seem like an ambitious outfit. I think they'll be looking to go better next year, of course. They'll be desperate to win. Ipswich Witches, you've got to have a lot of sympathy for Richie Hawkins, Chris Louis, all concerned there. Losing Doyle and Saifutinov, that could have been very different. It could have been the Witches' year. I get the feeling that they may well have won with Danny King, Adam Ellis as well. That was quite a team. And then, of course, Sheffield, the reigning champions from 2023. Losing Wolfenden wasn't easy. And they put up a good fight, but in the end, the Aces got the better of them, on a difficult night. On a difficult night at Allerton, when Ben Cook had that nasty crash that clearly affected one or two lads in the pits. But on the night, the Aces were the better team. So, exciting times. And then, of course, the Oxford Spires were a good addition. Kings Lynn and Birmingham, well, obviously question marks about Birmingham. But Kings Lynn can get off to the start like they finished with. I mean, they'll be in there, won't they? Peterborough did it the year before with Rob Lyon. Rob Lyon done it again at the end of the season. They really get cracking. They just need to start how they finished.
That's it, isn't it? They've just really suffered from really slow starts, and they get going like an express train by the time it gets to August. But it's the season's done by then. It's a bit frustrating. The talent is certainly in there. Yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens with Birmingham. Of course, they need to. They've got a financial situation at the moment. They need to get some money in. I hear different reports there, and the fact that if they can get this money sorted and get the right sponsorship in and backing and what have you, then they could be around for a couple of years. Yet there is redevelopment work due to take place at Perry Bar, but that is not imminent. So they're hoping, I think, that they're going to get a bit of time there, but they just need to ride out this current situation. But hopefully they will be back to the tapes in 2025, and I think at Premiership level as well, I think is the plan. But obviously, fingers crossed on that. And then and I think, as you say, talking about middle orders, I think from what I hear, I think middle orders are going to be the area where teams are doing the business quite a lot. I think from what I have heard on the grapevine, may or may not be correct, but the big hitters are likely to, the big hitters are likely to remain in situ at their various clubs, and it's the other riders might jiggle around a bit.
Yeah, well, look, we've had the fortunate times recently where we've had some genuine world-class riders coming back to the UK, and it works. It puts bums on seats. Sayfutdinov and Doyle at Ipswich have been terrific. Wherever they've gone, people have wanted to see them. Woofenden coming back into the sport with the Sheffield Tigers. There's no doubt that Damien Bates has enjoyed an upturn in attendance because of Woofenden's presence. Chris Holder and Jack Holder, Ty Woofenden, that is an eye-catching lineup that people want to go and see. So therefore, I tell you what, I bet you some of the wages that are going to be paid for middle order riders in 2025 could be quite extraordinary, because suddenly middle order riders, and there's going to be certain specific averages that are going to be very valuable for teams and the way they build their teams, which is unfortunate, and it is actually a weakness in our system in that regard, because it does mean that those guys, they're more than aware of that their worth. But look, as you rightly say, Ian, I agree with you. I think that certainly for the top four teams, they want to keep hold of their big hitters, but that will mean there's going to be movement in the middle order, and riders will be moving around big time, so we'll have to wait and see. But in the next few weeks and months, we will find out what that is. But I'm pleased to hear, and I'm pleased that the enthusiasm for riders like Sayfutdinov, Doyle, Lindgren, Max Frick, Kurtz, Bewley, Yankovic, I hope comes back to Kings Lynn. It'd be great to see, I don't know, maybe somebody like Andrei Lebedev's coming to ride here again. He had a very brief a period of time here. But those type of guys, there's no doubt that they have been, that obviously you've got to pay them, but they do repay because people want to come and see them.
Yeah, well, Ty Woofenden's doing a bit of a speaking tour at the moment, and there's been a big rumour going around this last week that he was going to sign for Oxford next year, and Ty was doing one of his speaking engagements with Pete Adams. The Pete Adams stand-up routine is very firmly in full flow at the moment, and Ty was asked whether there's anything in this rumour that he's going to sign for Oxford, and Ty doesn't beat about the bush, so he said that no, that he will not be signing for Oxford, and I think he's pretty much said that he's likely to be staying at Sheffield. So that one's already out there, and Brady Kurtz has already said in an interview last week that he's staying at Bellevue. So we are getting signs from riders that they are moving. As I say, the rumours generally seem to be around middle order riders that might be moving here, there, and everywhere. And but yeah, interesting times. But it's going to make for an exciting season. And hope if you can keep these big riders together, though, that's what fans latch onto, though, isn't it? And I think again, from a fan point of view, you have these relationships. You buy your program board or your T-shirt or whatever it is that you've got for that rider. You build that relationship up with them, and then the next season they're racing for your rival. It can be a bit confusing from that point of view. Yeah,
and that continuity is important. And as you rightly say, fans get behind riders. They become favourites of them. They get involved. They buy some merchandise and all the rest of it. So for like you say, like for them to be your favourite rider one year and then all of a sudden riding for the opposition the following season, it's not always easy for to switch allegiance from one person to another. But as I say, if we can have Doyle and Sayfutdinov back at Ipswich, if we've got the two holders and Woofenden at Sheffield, Oxford is an interesting case. They had Janowski there who had a steady season, started slowly, improved, but I'm sure that Oxford Spires would want a big hitter in there. Because it's a decent venue, lovely little track. I think if they get it right, they could be a top four side. So they'll be looking to do that. But look, I think there is some concern kicking about. Obviously, Birmingham is a concern, but I'd like to think that the winter will be a positive one, and we see some really attractive teams being built.
Yeah, in order to do that, though, we do need the help of the Polish authorities, and that deal that was done a couple of years ago that allowed riders to ride in a few leagues, with the trade-off being racing on Thursdays would be allowed in Poland to catch up on rain-offs. Now, there are various stories as to whether the Polish leagues, the Extraliga 2 league, will be racing on a Thursday night, which, of course, is going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, isn't it? So we need everybody to work together to allow all of the leagues to function and not it all be one-way traffic.
I really don't understand it. I think that the thing about it is if they don't have Speedway being healthy in other parts of Europe, Poland, then the sport will collapse. You can't just have it operating in Poland. It just won't work. And so therefore for Sweden, England, Denmark to have healthy leagues alongside which everybody recognises as the strongest league and the strongest country of Speedway, then it actually only benefits them. That they get very, very sort of twitchy about when riders get hurt and all the rest of it elsewhere. But it's a restriction of trade. It is a difficult one, and let's hope that there aren't too many hurdles that are put up for riders to come and continue to ride in the UK. I really do hope so, because it's been. I know, obviously I spent a lot of time with Chris Louis this year working together with him, and I know how excited he was as a club owner to go to meetings when he knew that Doyle and Saifutinov were racing for him. It excited him. And I think if it excites a club owner, then you'd like to think that that's reflected on the terraces as well. So let's keep our fingers crossed that there aren't too many hurdles put up and it makes it too difficult for riders. Because that choice is a difficult one, because if you can go and earn significant more money elsewhere, that's going to be, you're going to go that way. It's only a short career. But let's see. Let's hope that the PZM behave. Let's hope so. I hear what you're saying about Extraliga 2, though, because they're intending to run quite a lot of meetings on Thursdays. And that presents a problem. That presents a big problem. And I know negotiations are going on because live television on a Thursday night in Poland. And I know that negotiations are going on regarding to have a compromise on that, because if there is as many meetings on a Thursday night in Poland that they're talking about, that will have a big impact on teams for 2025 here, definitely. Because a lot of these guys, like your Ben Cooks and those middle order riders, they ride in the Extraliga 2. They ride there. So, let's hope that that there's compromises made to it. As I've said before, Poland cannot exist as an island on its own. It does need, and in my mind, it needs healthy leagues outside Poland. Sweden, Britain and Denmark need to be healthy, need to be running, because it will enable them to have a proper sport. If the interest in the sport worldwide will just diminish drastically if it's just in Poland. They will actually shoot themselves in the foot if they make it so hard for other people to run. They really will. It just won't have the appeal. It needs to have it. And I'm disappointed when I hear about how difficult they are sometimes to deal with. So let's hope that they can compromise and we can get a decent setup and an attractive teams. As I say, I said it earlier. We've become accustomed in the last couple of years to seeing some big names back in the sport here that excite people. It will be disappointing if we don't have them back because of circumstances. So fingers crossed on that.
Yeah, we just need common sense to prevail. But everything that you said there, absolutely. So 2024 season is done. You've seen a lot of Speedway, both in the UK and in the Grand Prix, and a lot of heats you've commentated on. What is your highlight then, Kelvin, of 2024?
Gosh, I think Dan Bewley winning in Cardiff and Dan Bewley winning again in, this is hard on Robert Lambert, but I think for him to have won a hat-trick of British titles as well and winning in Cardiff, and a very close second, of course, I've got to mention a silver medal for Robert Lambert.
It's kind of goes under the radar a little bit, I think, when you win the silver medal. And unfortunately, it was... I don't know if we touched on it actually, Robert Lambert winning his first Grand Prix as well, which was sort of overshadowed by Bartosz Zmarzlik winning the world title at the same time. But he's done it, and he's
couldn't have been on a worse night.
I was going to say,
couldn't have been on a worse night, could it?
Typical.
It was really rather unfortunate. But Robert Lambert, he's a cunning guy, and he's done remarkably well this year. But you're asking me for highlights. Those one-off highlights, I think Dan's performance in the British final was brilliant. Obviously Ty rode really well that night, and I think winning your home Grand Prix, Robert had a great opportunity, and a British one too. I think that was spectacular.
Yeah, for British Speedway, individually, the riders there in the Grand Prix, Dan Bewley and Robert Lambert, have had a terrific season. And onwards and upwards now to 2025 as we look forward to that. And we'll continue to look forward to 2025 in the next few weeks. And as soon as all the news is out from British Speedway's annual conference, we will bring you all the details. So look out for that one dropping very soon, and we'll have more updates through the course of the winter as well with myself and Kelvin Tatum. So take care, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one of Tatum Talks.